What up, nerds, and welcome to another episode of MTG Tutor, where we talk about all things Magic. If you guys like our content that we've put out so far, make sure you drop a like, hit a subscribe. It helps us out. It's going to give you some sweet notifications when we drop new content, which you're going to want to keep an eye out for because we have some awesome stuff that's going to be coming out soon. We have recently started working with a manufacturer to create our own custom playmats, which are going to be tailored specifically towards Commander. We're going to call them pod mats. Keep an eye out for more information on that coming soon. Today, we are going over power levels in casual Commander and kind of what they mean, what are they, what is like a power level 5 deck versus like a 7, because everyone says that their deck is a 7, and we all kind of have some different takes on it. And so, yeah, without, I guess, rambling on, we're just going to jump right into this tonight. So, we have, huh. I felt like I did really good, and then I hit a wall. Okay. So, yeah, let's just jump right into this tonight, and I guess I'll let Kit, why don't you kick us off? I think we're just going to go through the scale, right?
So
like 1 to 9.
We've kind of talked a little bit about this with power level 1 to like roughly 4 is just kind of basic deck building. Usually when you're starting, you have no experience, you're just putting together cards, similar colors, following the normal. Yeah, pretty much. Not anything that's really big or crazy. You find some cool cards, you put them together, you make a deck. It's fun. You might win, you might lose, but you know, just something pretty basic. Whereas moving past that into like the 5 to like 6 range, we typically peg majority of the precons. There's going to be those outliners that do fall down closer to the 4 or below. Not really too often, but sometimes it happens. But the 5 and 6 is something that we've kind of discussed and thought most precons will fall in that range.
Yeah, I think most precons fall in that range. Thunder Junction might be like a low 5, but yeah, I think that that's pretty accurate as like a 1 to 4, like you were saying, is like you're probably new to Magic, you're probably a beginner, or you're just throwing together a deck with maybe some cards that were like given to you by somebody or something. You're not really great at like synergizing that deck. And then 5, 6, that's like most precons. Every now and again you'll see a precon that'll creep up in level a little bit. Like I know that some of them are a little stronger. I know that one that's pretty widely considered to be up there a little bit more is the Eldrazi Commander Masters precon. I know that, I mean, I have a deck with that as the base. A lot of the people that I've talked to have kind of used that as a base for the deck, and as well as there's a few others as well. Like I believe that there's a Slivers one that's considered higher. There's a few Vampires ones, and so
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that one's that
and
one's
I think a lot of those
probably
outliners,
like a high 6.
Those outlier cards, if I can talk correctly.
Outliers?
Those outlier cards actually are typically from master sets or other kind of specialty sets. We've only recently been seeing that with like Universe Beyond and other stuff. But
yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
That's true. Universe Beyond,
but a majority
definitely
of
does have some power.
The precons, they have been within the 5, 6 range. Like the Pirates from Caverns of Ixalan, I would say that's about a 6, roughly.
Yeah,
it's fun. It has a good win con.
I would agree. Yeah, it's got some fun cards in it that I think solidify it, that seed it solidly into that 6th position. You know, it's got a card in there that lets you take extra turns. It does a lot of card steal, which in general as a mechanic to build a deck around is strong, because even if that deck itself is weak, going up against other decks that maybe have stronger pieces that you can steal is very, very good.
Very good. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the Ixalan overall was actually a pretty powerful set. Like, I know that not every single one of those decks was a banger, but that one was a pretty good 6. The vampire deck, I don't think it came out of the box as a 6. I think it was probably like a mid to high 5. But it was pretty good. The Dino deck, I definitely would say is for sure a seeded 6, probably creeping up towards a 7, probably like a high 6 for me.
Yeah, it definitely does work. I mean, I remember playing it the first few times against Tyler, and it just went off, and it was fun for me.
Yeah.
Until we played with our normal pod, and then I got targeted pretty quick, which is fair. But no, I think it's a great one compared to some of the other ones, like the murders at Karlov Manor. Is it Markov or Karlov? I always forget it.
It's Karlov Manor, but the professor says both. In his video today, it was bugging me so bad because, and like, I like the professor, I like his content, but he said he was saying Markov Manor sometimes, and then sometimes he would say Karlov Manor.
Isn't Markov?
Like, come on, Prof.
Isn't Markov on Innistrad?
It's Karlov Manor.
Karlov's on Ravnica.
Karlov Manor. Yeah, it's a whole other place where murders happened. Okay.
But murders happen
but
same, but different.
Forward, let's kind of define why we believe the 5 and 6, like what the 5 and 6 level would end up being and what it entails for deck construction or deck kind of contents. So we kind of discussed a little bit about how the precons are typically within that range. Precons come in usually with at least 3 to maybe even like 5, I would almost argue in some cases, actual strategies within the deck. And they do have a winning condition, and usually they're very simple. It's like use your commander to the fullest ability. It's whether it be the pirates, steal all your stuff, steal all of the other people's stuff. So then you can win because you have all the stuff, kind of thing. Very simple, very...
Yeah. Or like Galta goes very wide. It's Galta that's the commander of that one, right?
No, it's...
Well,
oh gosh, it's not Galta, but
it's a
regardless, the pirate, it'll pull up somewhere here, but yeah, that one, like you're saying, the win condition, that one is to go.
And that's not a bad strategy at all. That's a great win con. It's a normal win con. It's almost like probably 40% of win cons considered
like one of the most common.
I don't know, I'm just making up a statistic there, but I would say something like that.
It's probably up there. I mean, like, token decks are very, very popular, and I feel like some of the more simple to captain decks are about going wide because there's not a whole bunch of like crazy pieces in play. Like some of the decks that you have built, Kit, like your Urza deck, you know, that kind of has like a lot of cogs in the machine in order to like get you to the win. And like your Urza deck's definitely not like a 5 or 6, but my point is that like going wide, I think you're right. I would say that it's probably the most commonly used win condition for decks that you're going to see in Magic at this level, at like a 5 or 6.
Yeah, and I think the reason behind that is there's so many cards that let you do that. You know, it's just one of those things that it's like Lathril. I love my Lathril deck, and it's all about just generating a ton of Elf Warrior tokens and just overrunning my opponents. I've made some changes to it to make it even more annoying for Tyler, but I mean that was the key to that. The whole Lathril deck is about generating a ton of tokens and using those cards to swing away and be aggressive.
We agree that 5, 6, like there's a win condition, but there's maybe multiple like underlining, whether it be themes or other kind of strategies within the deck that don't mesh very well. They're great ideas, but you're putting in like, you know, multiple things that just aren't actually honing and becoming one actual goal or one actual like focus.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know. I think that there's still synergy in like a 5 to 6 precon. I think that it's just, I mean, like if you take any precon off the shelf, even the really good ones, and you were to break down every single card, you could probably come up with 10 cards in that precon that could be swapped for something that has more synergy. But I wouldn't say that they're not synergistic. I think it would be easier to say, at least for me, what a 5 to 6 is missing in order to be more powerful. And I think this kind of goes, I think, Kit, you're about to segue into the next level, which is like a 7. And I think what 5/6s are missing in order to hit that 7 is having some sort of like a winning combo in your deck where like, hey, once I get these pieces on board, if they're not removed very quickly, this game is mine. And some combos are like 2-card combos, and then I've seen combos that go up to like 4 or 5-card combos. But to me, that's the big thing with a 5/6 is it might be thematic, it might be fun, it might have some pieces in there that are really good and synergistic, but what it's missing is that winning combination that's going to guarantee that.
Because that combo is usually what we see as how people will win nowadays, whether it be in our group or we're watching online or, you know, anything like that. It's usually some type of combination that has caused the events to actually end up winning, taking that win for that group. But with that being said, do you guys think that having not only the combo, but also having more redundancies or the speed of getting that combo, like what level would you say in importance would you say that 7 actually has, or how much of that, I guess?
Yeah, so I have been playing a lot just through the Tolarian Community College Discord. I mean, like, there's like a looking for commander group that goes up on there almost like every 5 minutes throughout the day and even throughout the night, because I play, like when I play in the evenings, I play on that Discord with people that are overseas all the time. And I've started, like, a lot of times on there, I will play what is considered like my stronger decks because there's not a huge space for them in our pod, like in our play group. So I do play them on there. And what I have experienced the most when I first started doing it, I was just asking people. I would say, hey guys, I'm relatively new to Commander. I've only been playing Magic for about 8 months. I'm wanting to get into some higher level stuff. What makes a deck a 7? What makes a deck an 8? What is this? And the most common answer that I've been given is kind of like I said, it's a 7 is, for most people, what they consider a 7 is like you have a guaranteed win condition in your deck. And then from there, what bumps your deck to an 8 or a 9 depends all about, like Kit said, the speed and redundancy with which that win condition takes effect. So, like, for example, my Eldrazi deck, my colorless Eldrazi deck, it is not the standard precon. I have made several upgrades to it. I've swapped out a whole bunch of things. I've added a lot of the Titans into it and things like that. It's a decently strong deck at this point, but it's definitely a 7. It is like a high 7, but it's definitely not an 8. And the reason for that is because the speed of that deck is still very slow. I've seen, like, most people, once you're at an 8, they are running like mana vaults or mana crypts in their decks, and they're fully expecting to have fast mana. Like, I played my Eldrazi deck against a solid power 8 pod the other day, and I did very, very good, but I got almost the perfect opening hand. And by turn 2, I had 7 mana on board without having my Jeweled Lotus. It was because I had like 3 lands, like with wastes. I had a Soul Ring, I had a Thran Dynamo, and I think I had like a Darksteel Ingot or something like that. And so I ramped very, like, faster than I've ever ramped before in that game. And it made me, you know, like, the person that pops off first in Commander is usually the first to die. So you want to, you have to be very tactical to make sure that you're like the second person to pop off, or even the third, depending on the game. But I learned very quickly that my deck was not an 8, and that's because I ran out of answers super quick. Like, I got all this mana out, I got my commander on board like turn 2, I think, and like all these things, but then my deck just slowed down to like very, very slow crawl, where the other decks continued the speed at which they were growing and just popping off, and they had tons of interaction. And that's another thing. Now my Eldrazi deck is colorless, and there's only, I mean, there's not a lot of instance in colorless in general. There's like literally like less than 5. And there's only like 2, I think, colorless counter spells, and one of them is like conditional. And so there's not a whole bunch of interaction in colorless as it is, but to me, that's the biggest difference. Is like a 7, you have your win condition in your deck, and people are totally okay with me playing my Eldrazi in power level 7s, and I tell them the only fast mana I have in this deck is a Jeweled Lotus. And every single time, every single group has been like, that's not an issue. Do you have any mana crypts or mana vaults? I'm like, no. And they're like, all right, yeah, sounds like you're a 7. Even with adding like Ulamog and Kozilek and stuff to the deck and some of these big hitters and making the swaps that I have, most groups are like, yeah, it sounds like your deck's probably just a 7. Like, it's not that great.
I really think that that's kind of what distinguishes a lot of the different gauges or levels of Commander in general, just because those categories, the more you have, the higher frequency of you being able to get your combo, get your mana, get your redundancies, or have redundancies, I guess, as well as getting answers. So your interaction, those things are, the higher you go on the scale, in my opinion, are really the more you have of each of those categories. Because if you only have good interaction and you have a win con, but you're really slow, you're still going to be in probably the 7. I mean, but kind of even with that being said, I feel every deck has a range of playability, because like you mentioned, you had a really good mana. If you continued where you got something that helped you draw, you could have been playing an 8 that could have been an 8 that game. But there's going to be times that you're playing that game and it's actually going to perform as a 6. And this is just my interpretation of how that kind of happens, because I know that I've done that. I've played my Urza deck, which is mono blue, but I didn't pull mana and I didn't pull enough to cast Urza. So that game, that performed like trash. So it was performing super low. And because everybody's scared of that type of deck, you get targeted. So it already kind of hurts your curve of actually being able to actually pop off at all in chances. So I feel that that's going to be a big part, and that's how I've interpreted a lot of it. But going up to 8, you're going to have a lot more of those interactions, combos, redundancies for combos and interactions, as well as that speed. As well as like drawing. Drawing is so vital. The higher you go, if you don't have engines to draw, because that fuels every other possibility in your deck. So, and I've noticed that where like I have a deck that I modified a precon, and I took out some draw cards and I played the deck, and it did horrible. It did worse than what it did before. And then I tried getting draw cards back in, and then I can actually tell that it's maybe bumping it up a little bit. But that's...
Yeah, and...
Go ahead.
You're good. I was just going to say, and I totally agree with you with the aspect that decks can perform in a range, right? Like, I think a deck like my Eldrazi deck, I've definitely had games where it performed as a 6. I've had games where that deck just gets shut down over and over. And like, it's not fun for me to even play that deck when that happens. Just because it's like, well, I'm just sitting here, I play like one card and then I get removed. And so like when that happens, I'm like, dang, I should just like I should just scoop and go to Taco Bell real quick or something. Like, but I would agree with you. And that's one of the big differences between the high level and like a 7 that I have seen is when I've watched some of these higher level games, I've noticed a few things about them that are different than normal like 6-7 decks. Like a lot of these high level decks don't have any basic lands in them. Like they have 0. And part of the reason for that, I guess, is just to be able to activate the abilities. Like all of their lands either have like cycling, or they have some sort of fetch, or they have some sort of activated. And I guess they're just trying to maximize the efficiency of their deck, right? Like, sure, this can tap for mana, but can also do this or this. And so that's, I think, where you get into those higher levels is, like you said, the speed, but also the big one is redundancy, right? Like if you watch on YouTube any of the play channels that have like a high power level game, and I don't even mean C to EDH, but like level 9, and I don't know, I've heard that like 1 to 9 is casual and then CEDH is above that. I've also heard people say like, oh, level 9 is CEDH.
It's all made up. It's okay.
I'm not sure. I've never played CEDH, but
it's all a dream.
Yeah, it's all just a fake thing that we say about this cardboard game. So does it matter? But any of the stuff that I've seen on YouTube is like those high level decks, they don't struggle with any of that, right? They don't struggle with having a draw engine. They don't struggle with having those things. And I think that's where that redundancy comes into play. They just talked about this on Game Nights on a podcast episode a few weeks back, where they said that they ran the numbers on it. And basically, if you want to guarantee a condition or a mechanic to trigger in your deck, you need to have 7 individual pieces that can trigger that mechanic or that condition. And so really, I think what you're talking about when you get to those high levels, when you're saying redundancy and speed, is we're basically building play sets like in standard, just with cards that aren't named the same thing, right? Like, oh, I need fast mana. Okay, well, I can't have 4 soul rings. So instead, I'm going to have a mana vault. I'm going to have a mana crypt. I'm going to have a soul ring. I'm going to have, you know, a Thran Dynamo and a Basalt Monolith. And it's like, bam, there I've got 5 pieces. Now I've got, you know, an X chance to make sure that my opening hand has 1 piece of fast mana in it. Okay, I need a sack outlet. All right, I'm going to put a high city land, a Phyrexian, Phyrexian Tower or something like that land. I have both of them in my vampire deck, and I can't remember them now. A Viscera Seer and Altar of Dementia, and like I've got 7 pieces that let me sack. So now I'm almost guaranteed to have a piece that lets me sack. And I think that's the big difference. Those high level decks, you don't see them fumble as much because they've got all the pieces that they need on repeat, ready to come out to make sure that that deck's going to perform.
Yeah. So I was just going to say, so a lot of, you know, I haven't done the higher level stuff. So it sounds like from what you guys are saying, consistency is really important. The speed, how quickly your deck can start threatening wins, the resilience or the redundancies, the interaction and the synergy, just the more that those go into play, the more powerful the deck is.
This is one of those things that you'll notice with the higher power level decks. They are very focused. They, like, you will see around the 7 level, in my opinion, still like multiple focuses possible. So like you'll do like, say, a ton of, say, stealing cards in that focus, but then you also want some, you know, cards from the graveyard or something that you can recurge. Instead of you doing it where you only focus on the one thing, you'll see that other like added kind of ability or mechanic added into that deck. And, you know, it's personal preference and all that. And it's like, oh, I want that as well, whether way to get your things back in case you lose them or whatever it is. But you'll see that slowly going to just one kind of mechanic. Usually the higher it goes up the scale, and usually it's a really good mechanic that they're focusing on that ends up being in that 9 level or 8 level kind of deck style. But at least that's one of the things I've noticed in watching and seeing gameplay and seeing others create decks. Because when they have that focus and all those redundancies and everything that we just talked about, it's hard to have more than one mechanic kind of going on in that deck. Sometimes you can, because you might find a card that has multiple kind of effects on it that then, complements you. But usually it's going to be that one focus. And it's usually really effective at that point too.
Yeah. And one of the best ways actually to describe this, and this is actually kind of a toss to the Commander Pod, which is a newer commander-based podcast that has some really good stuff. I'll put a link to their channel in the bios of this video. But one thing that they mentioned that I had never heard before, and it might just be because of how new I am to Magic, but they said that one of the things to look for when you get to when you're looking at these like high level decks is that there is what is called fringe CEDH cards and fringe CEDH commanders. So like, for example, just a couple of those are like Mishra Excavation Prodigy, I think is one of them. He's like a fringe CEDH commander. And like Zeta Hedron Grinder, he's like a fringe CEDH commander. And like cards that like I didn't even know, I'd never even heard of, but like apparently these cards for these higher level players are just trigger cards where like if they see this card hit the battlefield, they're going to start to get concerned about the power level of your deck. It's kind of like if I tell people, hey, I'm playing vampires, I am in Orzhov. I usually will get the question of, okay, do you have a Sanguine Bond and an Exquisite Blood in that deck? Which I'm honest. I'm not going to lie to them and say, yes, I do have a Sanguine Bond and an Exquisite Blood. Yes, it is an infinite combo, guaranteed to kill one player. Yes, I do have pieces in there that will drain everyone. So if I get those out, I could drain the whole table. No, it's not an 8. Why? Because I do not have a tutor. I rely only on card draw to get that winning combo on the board. And so like there's fringe CEDH cards where when you get these like out or when they hit the discussion or the battlefield or whatever, that people that have that higher level experience with them will kind of be like weary of. And I think the Game Nights has actually done one where they talked about some of these, and some of these I run. Like, I'm pretty sure they said the Braids, I believe, is on that list of like cards that do not belong in Casual Commander, in their opinion. Is it Braids or Risen Nightmare that lets you like, I can sack something, like I could sack a land and then everyone has to sack a land as well or take damage.
Yeah, there's like 3 of them.
There's a couple different Braids, I think, but like, yeah, but like that's one of them. Another one is like Ad Nauseam. Ad Nauseam is like, I've wanted to build a deck that kind of focuses around Ad Nauseam for a long time. And I've found out since that people consider Ad Nauseam like almost a CEDH exclusive. Like if you run it in casual, you're kind of scum. But I don't know, whatever. I'm scum, I guess. It's fine. But there, like I said, long story short, just saying that there are what's considered fringe CEDH cards, and you can actually look those up and see like there are entire decks that are considered fringe CEDH. And so yeah, that's something that you can see to see those cards and those pieces that maybe have an impact to make a difference.
Yeah, there's always going to be those cards that you see hit the field and you're going to get concerned and wonder. And I mean, sometimes you ask the question, like, what's in that deck? Sometimes you just play a game and you don't even ask. And when you see that on the battlefield, you're like, what are you going to do with that? But, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've never had experience with a 9. I would love to play some Power 9, some Power Level 9 decks. I think that would be fun. typically those games are a lot shorter. Like when I played my Eldrazi deck in that power level 8 pod and I did very well, even though I did well, those guys said that all their decks did like terrible, which I didn't win. And my deck did like the best it's ever done. And they made the comment because I went against like a Voja and I think Vorinclex. I don't remember what the other ones were. But anyways, they made the comment when we were on, I think, turn 10, and they were like, this is the longest power level 8 game I've ever been in. And I was like, what? And they said that normally for them, power level 8 games don't go past like 6 or 7 turns. And like I said, it was like turn 10 or 12. And I mean, if you've ever watched, like I know we've mentioned before, but the Spike Feeders, they do some CEDH stuff, and their games are usually over within like 3 to 5 turns.
Yeah, and that'll happen when you have all those things.
And so
basically in line for your deck, you're able to actually get everything and get it out and be done with the game. And I mean, that's the goal, is to win. Sometimes that's not fun for people, but you know, it's kind of how it is.
I think that's the important thing, is when you're wanting to build these strong decks, make sure to have those conversations beforehand, kind of discuss. You know, we had a good discussion with our pod today about what our preferences are. And I know Kit and Tyler and I kind of have different areas of where we want to be when we play. You know, Kit's greatest joy is making a deck that isn't very powerful and winning with it. And so I think that's just the important thing, is just make sure that you have those conversations and realize that anytime that you play with new people, their definition of what a 7 is might be different than what your definition is. Just have that conversation. Be honest. Be open.
Yeah, it can all be resolved with a Rule Zero conversation. Like literally every issue that you can think of in a game of Commander can be resolved by having a Rule Zero conversation of just like, what's cool with you guys, what's not. I mean, Jordan just built a deck that is a solid 7. Maybe even a high 7 with his Toxic deck. I'll have to see it in like a pot of 4 because we've only played it. I've only seen it 1v1 and like in a pot of 3. So I want to see it in like a full pot of 4 and how it does. But yeah, you're getting some of that power creep in your blood.
I know. I like it. Yeah, I just feel bad. I mean, I'm still that nice kid in my gooey center.
I don't feel bad. I've started. I used to get very salty, especially with Kit, because Kit kills me a lot. And in some ways I consider Kit to be my arch nemesis of our pod. But I have learned over the past few weeks especially that like it's okay to lose and it's okay to kill someone out, and like you should not feel bad for killing someone in Commander, even if it's killing someone like quickly. Now, if you're like player targeting and you're just trying to knock someone out of the game, then that's no fun for anyone, in my opinion. But I don't feel bad anymore for taking someone out damage wise. I have lost games because I have chosen to like flip a coin to see who I take out, even though I know which person I need to take out. But being like, oh man, I feel really bad. Let me roll a dice and see who it's going to go towards. So yeah, I don't think anyone should feel bad. I mean, the faster everyone's gone, then you can get another game in. So.
That's super true. And I think that is, you know, we get together to play Magic, not to sitting around and wait for the next game to start, right?
Be done.
Yeah. Unless it's Kit. Unless it's Kit, then I need to knock him out turn 2 because he's my arch enemy.
So who's Ash and who's Gary in this scenario?
I don't
know who Ash or Gary is.
What? Oh, come on.
I don't.
Oh, well, I mean, like, yeah, I guess
Ash Ketchum and Gary Oak. Come on.
No, I think I would just, you know, in kind of closing, I think I would just say, like we said, have that conversation with your pod. Above all else, do what is fun for you.
Lying to everybody.
If what is fun for you is playing, like, lying to, If what's fun for you though is playing like a power level 8, 7, 8, 9 type deck, if you really want to play high level EDH, maybe, you might have to find a new pod, and like, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with making more friends in Magic and whatnot. That's not to say that you can't ever play with your friends again, but sometimes we have decks we don't get to play very often. I know that Kit has a lot of decks, and he's mentioned that there's a lot of them that he doesn't play in our pod, and that he hasn't played for like a very long time because they're strong and people don't like when he plays them. But I think that that's, like you said, a rule zero conversation that needs to happen. If you like playing high level, don't try and always play in a low level pod and not have fun, because that's the biggest thing. Enjoy your game of Magic, enjoy it your way. And while it might be uncomfortable to find a new pod, once you do, it's going to be pretty much just the same as with your old pod, except for these guys play the type of Magic you like to play. So have fun.
Yeah, and I think with technology today, there's a lot of avenues to be able to play with new people.
Yeah.
You have the Tolarian Community College Discord, you have Spell Table, you have all sorts of different things that you can find people to play games with. So find what you like and play it. Well, that wraps up our episode of MTG Tutor. Do you guys agree with what we said? If you disagree or agree, make sure to comment below. Make sure to like and subscribe if you like what you see. It really helps out our channel. We have some awesome things coming down the pipeline here pretty soon with our pod mats and everything else. So if you want to know more information, make sure to keep listening so that way you don't miss any news. With that, we're going to sign off. Till next time.
Peace.